You probably haven't seen this ESRB video game rating in the wild, but you probably have seen these everywhere if you live in these countries. Believe it or not, the AO rating has only been given out 26 times, which might be a little bit confusing on the surface. This is for ages 17 plus. This is for ages 18 plus, and yet one of these is sold in stores and one of these is not. I'll let you figure out which one. It's pretty obvious. So how did the ESRB ratings come to be? What's the difference between M and AO? And how are video games rated anyway? To begin, let's go back in time to the 1970s. The 1970s were the Wild West of video game developers simply doing whatever they could with oversized pixels. Video games were new, so the ESRB was not a thing yet. But just you wait, because if people want to be inappropriate, they'll figure out how to be inappropriate, even if they have to use oversized pixels. For the most part, early video games were innocent. This was mostly an age of arcade-based games. You had your Pong, you had your Fonz, you had your Heavyweight Champ, and then you had things like Death Race. Death Race was the first real video game controversy, but it was not as bad as some other things that we're gonna talk about later. The entire point of Death Race was to run over gremlins with a car. The associated death sound, however, was considered disturbing by many people, but for the most part, video games were family friendly. But as video games continued on and pixels went from being very big to still big but smaller, you had your wholesome 1980s games like Pac-Man and Super Off-Road. But with consoles entering the home, there were a few controversial video games too, especially with the Atari console, because Atari was like, let's have whatever developers develop whatever they want for our console, which led to crap like this. Custer's Revenge was a big point of contention in the early 1980s because it was downright offensive. I'm gonna level with you for a second. I try to keep things lighthearted during these videos, but like, it's so bad, I'm not even gonna show it. Custer's Revenge is complicated, but this is the game that's often credited as getting people to feel uneasy as video games move forward. Throughout the 1980s, a lot of video games were more or less appropriate, but a few of them began to get, dare I say, intense. And eventually, in the 1990s, their intensity came to a head with the United States government. The 1990s were not just a time of VHS tapes, neon Taco Bells, and blockbusters. In the 1990s in America, violence was seen as a growing problem. Violence on TV was seen as getting more extreme, and TV ratings were not a thing until the mid-1990s in America. A lot of people thought video games could have lasting negative impacts on society because instead of watching violence on the TV, people in real life could enact violence via video game. It was like actionable. It was like they were doing it. Does media violence actually impact real world violence though? That is a conversation that I am not willing to get into in this video, but I know a few of you will have that conversation in the comments, and I will say, please be nice if you have that conversation because I have seen some of your back and forth and they are not pretty. But the point is, in the early 1990s, a lot of people thought that they were linked. And after the release of 1992's Night Trap and Mortal Kombat, with their realistic depictions of violence, the United States government felt the need to step in. Because video games being unregulated was a threat to society. Apparently. There's another big cultural element to this. In the early 1990s, a lot of people thought that video games were only for kids. In modern society, I would like to think that most people know that's not true, but in the 1990s, a lot of people were thinking, Mortal Kombat is gonna turn kids into hooligans. So in 1993, the video game hearings began, and the government discussed video games and their impact on society. Like during the hearings, people brought in guns that came with some of the games and were like, look what these companies are selling to our kids.
Make no mistake about it, Lethal Enforcers is aimed at young kids. And the lead of the ad says, you won't find a toy like this in any Cracker Jack box.
Obviously, the video game industry did not want to be regulated by the government. To simplify a lot of events, after a few failed attempts, the video game industry eventually developed a way to self-regulate video games with the ESRB, the Entertainment Software Rating Board, which had a system to regulate video games. With video game ratings, you knew who video games were intended for. It meant that you were not trying to sell Mortal Kombat to like a 6-year-old. But the ESRB rating process is probably not what you think it is. For example, when the ESRB is rating a video game, they typically don't even play it. If you and I are both sitting next to each other watching the same movie, for example, we're both having the exact same experience, so the movie or TV show is rated accordingly. But let's say we're both playing a video game, and I'm going to use The Sims 4 as an example. I know. While playing The Sims, I could buy a house or make my sim a best-selling author. You know, unfulfilled dreams I have in real life. My Sims game is peaceful, calm, wholesome. Meanwhile, when you're playing The Sims, you might be locking your sim inside swimming pools or putting them inside of a wall with no bathroom. I mean, I've done that as well, but these are two different experiences playing the same game. And regardless of how any user plays the game, the ESRB has to give that game one singular rating. Unlike movies and TV, the video game rating system is not actually straightforward. The ESRB rates a reported 1,000 games per year. There's no realistic way where one normal-sized committee could play and beat 1,000 games in a year. I mean, that would be a great job. I would apply for it. So instead of a more straightforward rating process like movies and TV shows, the ESRB has a more unique rating process. When a video game is submitted to the ESRB for review, video game companies submit a questionnaire with information about the video game and videos of the video game. And at least 3 video game raters are given a copy of the survey and videos of the game. The videos are meant to showcase the most extreme elements of the game. The violence, the swearing, the naughtiness. But they don't just submit that. The video games submitted are not just like a highlight reel of all the bad stuff that happens. The ESRB needs to understand the entirety of a game without having actually played it. So the videos also include like atmosphere and calm things. You know what I mean? It's like the whole thing. So using all of this information, the ESRB rates the video game accordingly. But there's a lot of variation in how a game can be rated, even if it has the same rating. The ESRB ratings are famous, but who were they designed for? Were they designed for the player? Not really. They were designed for parents of kids. Now, the intention of a video game rating is for a parent who's never played video games or has no idea about video games, which they must be lame at parties, can look at an ESRB rating and determine if that video game is appropriate for their kid. The rating itself is only the beginning because there's also a content descriptor, which, you know, describes the content. We've all seen them, so you know what I'm talking about. But why do they have them, you ask? Even though these two kids are probably the same age, this kid might be able to handle violent stuff, and this kid over here is a loser who only watches Disney movies and can't handle anything difficult in his life. That's actually me as a kid. I can say that kind of stuff, but you can't. The point is, being the same age does not mean that you can both handle the same stuff. So that's why the rating itself is only the jumping point, but then the content descriptors are the key to everything. That was very dramatic, but you know what I mean. So what does the ESRB rating process look like, and how does each game get its own content descriptor? Each rating process in general takes about 30 to 45 minutes to complete, but it could take several hours depending on factors. I don't know what those factors are. The actual process is pretty secret. Then, when it's ready, the video game rating is released back to the video game company, who can accept the rating or appeal it. And let's be honest with ourselves for a second, the ESRB rating process is not perfect. And throughout the years, the ESRB has had their fair share of criticisms. But from my research, it seems to me like the ESRB is doing the best they can, and they try to correct their mistakes. If you discuss this, please be nice in the comments. So what are the ratings that the ESRB uses, and what do they really mean? The ESRB launched their video game ratings in 1994, and at the time of this video, 2 video game ratings have been added since, and 1 has been discontinued. A moment of silence for the early childhood rating, which means that a game was geared towards preschoolers. A rating that was discontinued in 2018 because of, and I quote, underuse. You will not be missed, as I did not know that you existed before I researched this video. In 1994, the ESRB launched with K to A, T, M, AO, and RP, along with the rating that we discussed that nobody remembers. RP, it stands for rating pending. It basically means that the ESRB has not rated it yet. It's pending. You get it. Then we have K to A, which is kids through adults, which is now E. This video game rating means that the video game is appropriate for everybody, from your 3-year-old niece to your 90-year-old grandma. But in 1998, there was some legal thing, so the K to A had to be changed to E. Whatever. Next is T, which is kind of like PG-13 movies. These games are intended for people 13 and over. M stands for mature, 17 plus. A lot of the elements present in T games are also present in M games, except a lot more intense. With M games, 17 plus is a suggestion. You might have to show your ID to buy an M game at a store, but it's still a suggestion that you're 17 or older when you played the game. But when we get to AO, which is 18 and over to play the game, there is no suggestion. It's a hard stop. You have to be over 18 to play it, or you cannot play it if you're a kid. You know what I mean? Because many games in this category are, well, you know what they're about. Gambling. Okay, fine. AO also has extreme violence and, a lot of AO games are really naughty. We all know what I'm talking about, and I know you're thinking about it. Do not make me spell it out for you. And AO definitely has a bad reputation, which I will swing back to. There were 2 ratings added after the ESRB launched. The first is rating pending 17 plus, which means that a rating is pending, but it's probably gonna be 17 plus. In 2005, the ESRB added the Everyone 10 plus rating. It's a rating designed to fit in between E and T, including elements that are appropriate for people who are 10 and older. I'm not gonna lie, I personally think that Everyone 10 plus should just be 10 plus. By that logic, T should also be called E13 plus and M should be called E17 plus. Like, you know what I mean? I don't get it, okay? I think it's a dumb name. The ESRB ratings aren't just ratings, they also have labels on them. There's 2 points to the ESRB rating label besides the rating. There's the content descriptor and the interactive elements. Content descriptors tell you what's in a game. At the time of this video, there's 30 different content descriptor tags listed on the ESRB website. Here is a list of them, which I do not expect any of you to be able to read when it's scrolling across so quickly. But then there's a third part to the rating label, which is the interactive elements section. Interactive elements, if you don't know, are elements that are part of a game but don't actually influence the rating itself. There are 5 of these interactive element categories, including in-game purchases, which means you can make purchases in-game. There's also one that specifies that in-game purchases can be for randomized items like loot boxes. Shares location, which means you know what it means. Unrestricted internet, which means you're on the internet. And lastly is users interact, which means that But why are there so few games rated AO? Developers normally do not want their games to be rated AO. Sony, Nintendo, and Microsoft have all self-banned AO games from being sold on their platforms. Twitch does not allow them to be streamed, and stores don't want to sell them. But where can you play an AO game if nobody wants to sell them? Basically PCs. But here's the other thing. There are a lot of other games that are explicit, and many of them you may have encountered. I do not want to know your search history, but those kind of games are out there. Most really naughty games intentionally just sell themselves as unrated on PCs. This doesn't mean that there's only 26 games out there with AO content. It just means that there's 26 rated games out there with AO content. The internet has many, many, many more that would qualify for it, I am sure. Because honestly, the naughty games know what they are, and they know how they want to be sold. Even though movies and TV shows also have ratings, their whole rating history is a bit different. If you want to know about the history of TV ratings, please click over here. And if you want to know about the history of movie ratings, please click over here. Thank you so much for watching.